Hello class, I just wanted to give you a decent tutorial video on our first Excel based assignment. Just to show you what the expectations are, what you need to do, and to slip in and embed some tips and tricks, not just for this assignment, but in Excel in general. Just in case some of you are not as well versed in the software as some others are. So with that, we have this assignment, and the first question is basically just asking you to make an Excel worksheet that you'll call your grade calculator. And so what this could look like is just something like this. It's just going to be a little table with some column names here, what each of your assignments are, and what you need to pay note is from the syllabus we have these weights in that are listed for each assignment type. Now what I've done in this particular example, when you make a weighted grade calculator, all that is basically doing is taking the grade that you receive on a particular assignment and multiplying it by a decimal based version of the weight. So for example, this particular Excel based homework assignment, each of these are worth 7.5%. 7.5% expressed as a decimal is 0.075. Now what we need to do is take all our weights for the assignments, make sure they add up to 1 or 100%, and that's simply the sum of all of these. And then we just take that, take the grade that you get, and then multiply it. And so what you'll see here, we call this the function box. So you see this little FX button, insert function. Anything that you type in a cell will show up in the function box up here. And Excel, so you know, whenever it sees an equal sign first, Excel knows, hey, you're giving me a formula or a function of some type. So for this particular example, the formula is just the equal sign, cell C3, and you can get these cells. You don't have to type C3 like that. You can actually just click on the cell and Excel will put the cell reference in for you. The multiply sign is just the asterisk, okay? And then you can just click the other cell that you need and click enter, and you're going to get the value that you need. Now for the grade calculator, all this does is when you do this formula, you can either copy and paste it down, but there's this little black box. You can barely see it, but it's right here in the lower right corner. You can just take that and just drag it down, and it's going to repeat the formula. So if I was to actually delete all this, I'm like, oh, do I need to really type in all these formulas? No, you don't. You just take that little black corner, slide it down, and you get all your values done for you, quick and easy. So the whole point you really need on Excel, know what Excel is, you let Excel do the work for you. It really is one of the most powerful programs that you have readily available to you. So we're going to try to capitalize on that. So your final grade is simply the sum of all these what I call contributions. So obviously the higher the grade times the weight is going to give you a higher contribution. Now a couple other things. You saw me select some columns here. I wanted to just tell you down here in the lower right corner, Excel gives you some automatic values, and you can actually specify. You can change what these are, but it gives me the average, the count, and the sum for any group of information that I highlight, whether it's columns, whether it's rows, whether it's columns and rows, if that made sense. But just something to know that Excel has these little quirks about it you should be aware of if you ever want to do quick calculations. This final grade, you don't necessarily need to put it in there, but again, it's just the sum of these contributions. And I can do that easily with just the equal sign, SUM, and then selecting E3 through A4. Again, that's just me just selecting the column and making sure it ends in the parentheses. But over here in the right corner, you have these auto features here. So I could have, let's just say I wanted the sum here. I can click auto sum. Excel automatically recognizes it. I click enter and I get my numbers done for me. So there you go. That's a great calculator. It can look like this. Doesn't necessarily have to look like this, but this is one point of reference for you. You don't need to have this in here, the final grade. I have this syntax, if you will, that tells me if it's greater than 8 or 9, give it an A. If it's greater than 79, give it a B, so on and so forth. But that's just a little extra flair, if you will, that I added. The second question, it's asking about descriptive statistics for this tea bag data. I don't know why they pick tea bags, but it's tea bags. So what you should know is whenever you see data like this, you should say, uh-oh, what do I do with this? Excel can work with data that's arranged like this, but for you as the analyst, it's not pretty. Excel is really set up, if you see these letters across the top of a spreadsheet and these numbers, I mean, these are your columns, these are your rows. Excel likes clean data, as I call it, that's really organized in columns and rows. So my suggestion to you is to take this table of data and turn it into a single column. So it could look something like this. And why is this important to always have your data arranged in rows and columns? Because I can do things like this. I can add in what's called a filter. And here I just took it off. I can put it back on. And it gives me this little arrow right here. And it allows me to select specific values. I can search the data. I can sort it largest to smallest, smallest to largest, so on and so forth. So there's one little tip and trick there you should know. So for this particular question, it's asking for some descriptive statistics, and you can do that through various functions. Again, this little function box, if you click here, you can type in whatever function that you want, but for our point of reference, you can get all the information, almost all of it, that you need to know through what's called the Data Analysis Tool Pack. Now that you were instructed to install that, that is going to be found under the Data tab, and then Data Analysis. And in the Data Analysis Tool Pack, basically this is a full-featured statistical tool package here. And we would want to look at right here, descriptive statistics. You just click OK. It asks you what your input range is. Again, it wants one column of data. So you would just select your data. And is it grouped by columns or rows? It's columns. Labels in the first row, yes, because we did put in a column. And where do we want our output? I always put a new worksheet, so leave that. And then just click Summary Statistics, okay? And that's it. You just click OK. And then you get this nice little output here. And this gives us things like the mean, median, mode. So those are our measures of central tendency, the 3 M's. It gives our variance, our standard deviation, our minimum, our maximum. And we'll get to terms like this later in the course, kurtosis and skewness, because it talks about the distribution of the data. So with that, you can get most of the information for the question. It asks about quartile 1 and quartile 3. And gives you some function syntax for that, and literally it just used the quartile.exe. What that tells you is the quartile. So you know there's quartiles. First quartile typically corresponds to the 25th percentile. The second is the 50th, or the mean or median, and the third is the 75th. But our data is not arranged in quartiles right now. But when Excel will know to sort the data and find that first 25%, the 50th, and the 75th. It's asking for the first and the third, so you can just use 1. That's all you put in there, and 3, which I put in there. And then the interquartile range is just you subtract the 2, so 3 from the 1, and you get this value here. Now it also asks for the coefficient of variation. I don't know why. It's kind of a useless statistic, but this assignment is requiring it. And all that is the standard deviation, okay, this number, which is also found here and from the Data Analysis Tool Pack output, divided by the mean times 100, and it converts it to a percent, and there's your coefficient of variation. Okay, that question is done. Your next question is the Zillow question. Okay, again, we see data arranged in a table. Not good. We want to get it into a single column, which will look something like this column here. Now, here's a little tip for this question. A lot of times you'll see data, whether it's tables or graphs, that truncate the numbers, and this is one of those examples. They gave you sales in thousands. So my point is, why leave it truncated? Why don't you convert it back to thousands? So the easiest thing to do is to take each cell and multiply it by 1,000. And that's all I did here. I took cell A2, multiplied it by 1,000, and then just copied it down using that little trick, using the black square, and it converted all my data into the actual sale price data that the question is talking about. Now we'll just ignore this little column here. It says bins. We'll get to that in a second, because I like to tell you how to make a histogram the easier way, using a pivot table or pivot chart versus what is recommended for you, because it makes life a lot easier, meaning in a couple clicks, and two, it gives you cleaner output. Okay, because when we talk about things like histograms, it's grouping continuous data. Okay, that's data that is usually on some sort of scale that is equal intervaled, and then chunking it by various categorical ranges that you want, and those could be arbitrary. They're arbitrary, but you can let Excel do that for you very easily. And this is right here what you're looking at here. This is a pivot table. Right here, this is a pivot chart. And all I did was I took this data here and went to Insert, Pivot Table. Excel automatically knows to select the data. I'm going to go ahead and say put in a new worksheet. We're interested in the sales dollars, and we will change this to a count, okay, for the values here. And then you want to just put this into the rows here. Now here's every account of every dollar figure that's in that sales dollar column. To get our pivot table grouped by bins, so to speak, we go to up here, Group Selection. And you know what, just let Excel start with, it automatically finds the lowest number, the highest number, and it gives you an arbitrary number to group it by. In this case, it's giving us, I believe that's 100,000. So we just click OK. And here are what are called our bin ranges. So we have 5 houses sold between $57,000 and $156.99. We've got 23 between $157 and $256.99. And again, if you click on the cell, any cell within the table, this grouping fields option will highlight. And so you can go back to group selection, and let's just say you wanted to change this to, I don't know, 90,000. You click OK, you'll see the numbers change. If you want to change it to, I don't know, 200,000, click OK, you'll get less groups. So that's how you group the data to get bins, which you can then use to make a histogram. So let's go back to 100,000. Click OK. So to make your histogram, you just select the pivot table chart, click Insert, click Column Graph, click the first 2D one, and there we go. We have the makings of a histogram here. So what you should know about a histogram, what makes it unique compared to a normal bar chart, is it's typically meant to have no gaps, so they're fat bars. So change the gap width by double clicking and changing it to 0, and you'll get the makings of a histogram like that. And here you got your nice little ranges here, 57,000 to 156.99, so on and so forth. Now what you can do is you can clean up this graph a bit under the layout. Okay, you can change the color and depth perception of the bars. You can go under here under layout and put in data labels. You can put the chart title above the chart. You can label the axes, which I highly recommend. And another thing with pivot charts is if you right click on them, you can hide all the field values, and that gets rid of that. So I usually don't like having the legend, so I can delete that too. Okay, so that's one method of doing the histogram. The same method applies to making the pie chart again, you just select the data, go to Insert, Pie, click it, and there you go. There's your pie chart. Again, I suggest cleaning this up, adding data labels. I'm sorry, that's probably not a good idea because it's already color coded. But clean up, remove, change your title. You can double click it and edit it. So that's your pie chart. The last other thing I want to show you is this is what a pie chart, or sorry, histogram looks like using the bin method and the histogram method within the data analysis tool pack. So if I was to go back to my data here, and this is why I put this here, because Excel needs to have these bins listed separately, so, and it likes to have them on the same worksheet, I found out as well. So if I go to histogram and click OK, it asks where's my raw data, which is this column, where's my bin range, it's this column here. You want to check every button here, Pareto, cumulative, output, chart output. Just check it all, make sure your labels are checked, and I would put in a new worksheet. You click OK, and then you get this little histogram here with the Pareto line. And again, these bars technically need to be fat, so I like to change them to 0. And that's how you make a histogram using the data analysis tool pack. I like my method better using the pivot chart because you look at the big difference here. Look at these bins here. You just have the end point numbers of the range. You actually don't have the range, whereas in my method you get the actual ranges on the bottom here. So a little trick for you. Okay, so that's it. You got your grade calculator, your T-bag example, the Zillow. Make sure you set up your data into columns. You understand what the function box is. You know you get the nice little calculations here in the lower right corner. So that's it, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm sorry for this being this. My videos are normally not this long, but I just want to get you on a good start with this first Excel-based assignment. All right, that's it.